were a rival tribe to the invading Turks. And so there was this constant battle between the Abbasids, who were allies because of intermarriage to one Turkish tribe, and the external Turks who were coming in to fight them because of rivalries between them and issues of power that were coming from another tribe. And it should be remembered that the Turks that the Abbasids had married into, those particular tribes, became the Abbasids that became the Ottomans that later came in. So there was a direct link between them. A direct link. The persecution of the ulama continued, with numerous deaths of scholars during this time that did not die in their beds. They died of being killed or tortured. In the year 148, we had a similar situation occur in which scholars resisting the rule of the Banul Abbas paid dearly for it. You should also remember during this time that the Abbasid era was the first time in which you had government scholars. You started to see scholars who were paid to give fatwas that matched with the regime that they were under. And so for some reason you found that Abbasid leaders, when they did things, the fatwa never ceased to match with the rulers. And then that started to create another struggle between the ulama of adl and the ulama usu, the ulama of righteousness and the evil ulama. And this prophecy had been mentioned by Imam Ibn Rajab rahimahullah in his book Commentary on the Hadith of the Two Hungry Wolves. And he quoted a number of hadith about rulers entering into the presence of false teachers and leaders, and the rulers actually being sought out. There's one hadith that's quoted by Imam Ibn Rajab rahimahullah with his own sanad, in which it stated, "There shall come rulers after me, and there will be men from among my ummah that delve into the religion deeply. And then shaitan will come to them and say, if only you would enter into the presence of the rulers but stay separate with your religion, then you should be able to take benefit. But that shall not happen. Just as nothing is harvested from the thorny bush except for thorns, and nothing is gained from the presence of the ruler except farness from Allah, and one does not come close to the ruler except they go further from Allah." And that hadith was held by many scholars to be the touchstone of government scholars and the era that it would begin in. The year 148 came in, with the Abbasids engaging in numerous military campaigns to strengthen their position throughout the area and to welcome in the large swathes of people. Because Bani Umayyah in some instances had refused or had strongly counseled against conversion to Islam to keep the jizya pouring into the Muslim treasury, the Abbasids had a more liberal approach in which they actually brought in swathes of people. But the problem with the Abbasids is, in the course of bringing in these large amounts of people, they did not have time, with thousands of people coming in every year, to give them all checkups. And with putting the ulama in prison, fighting with the ulama, they were really the people that would have taught them. But if the ulama are in jail, the ignorant are coming into the faith from nowhere, it's leaving huge amounts of people that have become Muslim but have to put the pieces together themselves. Similarly to what's happening in the English-speaking countries, in which people are becoming Muslim and they're having to sort of put the pieces together for themselves, because we either don't have ulama here, or the ones that we have here, or sheikhs, if they're knowledgeable enough, don't know the language, or there's all different types of extenuating circumstances that are happening that are keeping. And so what's happening is Muslims, people that come into the deen, are forming their own Islams. So you have actual Islam with a capital I, but then you have Islams. You have the Islam of Amina Wadud, you have the Islam of the Progressive Muslim Union, you have the Islam. People are forming their own Islam. And that is part of what the Abbasids faced. So you had the rise of the Karramiyya, the rise of the Jahmiyya, the rise of different forms of the Khawarij, the rise of the Qadariyya, because of the ulama going in and out of prison and everything happening, were just forming their own Islam. As the persecution continued, as we mentioned, in 150 AH, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah died. His 40 qadis continued to teach, particularly Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf continued to teach. Imam Shafi'ii rahimahullah said about Imam Abu Hanifa, people who study fiqh are the children of Imam Abu Hanifa. Yazid ibn Harun said, I have not seen one with more righteousness and intellect than Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, when he was mentioned in the presence of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he used to say, rahimahullah. Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf rahimahullah, whenever he was sent issues of masail, he would always check with Imam Abu Hanifa's rulings first, although Imam Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf rahimahullah was a mujtahid himself. We come to year 151 of the Hijrah. After Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah died, with the Hanafi scholars, they began the process of spreading the fiqh. Now, in spreading the Hanafi fiqh, what happened is the Hanafi scholars went very wide in their approach. And by going very wide in their approach, they took a different way to say the scholars of the Hanbali, Maliki, and Shafi'i schools. The Hanafis would send their qadis out almost immediately. And they would send students out almost immediately. So you had huge areas, provinces that would come under one man who would give fatwa for them. And initially it worked because the qadi was able to get from place to place relatively easy. But as the area increased, it created more issues. And as we know, the four schools during this time and their scholars remained separate from any earthly government interference. Major scholars remained separate from government interference. So when they sent qadis and judges to different people, it created realities that it resulted just in a lot of personal tribulation, because the scholars were not, the scholars after Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah were organized, but they would be over large swathes of people. They weren't able to put it all under one. And to this day, that's why the Hanafi school, is big as it is, it will have 3 narrations within it. It has 21 usul. The Hanafi usul are 21 in number, because the machinery used to magnetize and operate the Hanafi school is so vast because of these huge areas that they ruled over, that it needed to be complex, it needed to be large. They did not have the tools of bureaucratic office yet at that time. So the Hanafi school, not just in number, but just in terms of study, it's massive. And you'll see people that have studied the Hanafi school for years, 20 years, and they have still not made a significant impact within the school to have a wide enough hand of mastery to judge in affairs as judges in courts, because of how vast the school is. And that's not taking anything away from it. That's merely a statement of how much of an interdisciplinary effort it was. You had 40 qadis among Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah who judged by his standard and used his methods for deriving fatwa. Now within that you had, as was the case with all mujtahids, you had absolute mujtahids. These were the people that had memorized the Qur'an in its entirety, all of the ahadith. Then you had the era of, after the absolute mujtahids, you had the era of the mujtahidun al-mutlaqun fil madhab, These are absolute mujtahids within the madhab. These include people like Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf, Yaqub ibn Ibrahim al-Ansari, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani. These were people who were absolute mujtahids within the madhab. They had memorized the Qur'an more than 100,000 ahadith. But they were still bound to use the logarithm that had been handed to them by the absolute mujtahid. They could differ with an absolute mujtahid in a number of masail, but they could not change the actual foundational principles of how the madhab operates. So you'll find in Hanafi fiqh, you'll meet people, say, from Afghanistan, who will then meet someone who is from Iraq, and they are both Hanafis. But a Hanafi from Afghanistan will say, why are your feet uncovered in the salah? Because the back of your feet are meant to be covered by the back of your dress in salah. But a Hanafi in Iraq will say, no, it's not. And it will go back to the mujtahidun al-mutlaqun fil madhab. So you'll find a ruling from Imam Abu Hanifa, but then you'll find a ruling where Imams Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf and Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani have differed with him in an area. And that's translated out and radiated across. And so Hanafis that are coming from South Asia, when they meet Hanafis that are coming from the Arab world, will see a noticeable difference. And he's saying, why is this? It's not because the Hanafis of South Asia don't know Hanafi fiqh. And the Hanafis of the Arab world, well, they know, they're Arabs, they must know. It's nothing to do with that. It's to do with the vastness of the school, the fatawa, and the mujtahidun al-mutlaqun. Now we move on from that point, from those years, into year 152 Hijri. In the year of 152 Hijri, the mujtahidun al-mutlaqun fil madhab, from within all four schools, began the process of simplifying the books. They began the process of simplifying the books. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, his principle within this was you would have a mass of documents regarding wudu, salah, fasting, zakah. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was the first one to actually organize a book. All the material was there, but he began the book by starting Kitab al-Tahara, the book of Tahara. And he would order the book all the way to the end, and the last chapter would be Kitab al-Shahada, the book of witnesses. And to this day, it doesn't matter which of the four you follow. They're all organized like that. Every single last one of them. They will start with the book of Tahara. Now the fatwas will be different within them and the rulings and understanding. But they will start with Kitab al-Tahara from the beginning, and it will run all the way through the same pattern to the end of the book, to the book of witnesses. This is what the Hanafi scholars did. Now there is a common misappropriation of the Hanafi school in current times, in which there will be people that say, well, listen, the Hanafi scholars or the Hanafi school doesn't have any proofs for its positions. It doesn't have any proofs. And that's why when you read their fiqh books, whether it's in English or in Urdu, there's no proofs in there. Why? Because the Hanafi madhab isn't based on any proofs. This is what you're hearing in English. It's not based on any proofs. If it was based on any proofs, the proofs would have been in the books. No, we have to look at the methods, because the different schools, based upon the mashrab of the companions that taught, had different ways of teaching. And the Hanafi school, when the ulama, the mujtahidun al-mutlaqun and mujtahidun al-mutlaqun fil madhab, when they wrote their books, they specifically did not write them with evidences and would only have them with the fatawa as a method of what's called dibaj. Dibaj is a type of coding in which you make it impossible for someone who does not belong to that category of people to read them and then go astray by using them. And so when you look at books that have been written by Hanafi ulama now that are just translated straight into English, without any discussion, without any notes, without any tahqiq, without anything, and people look at them and say, well, subhanAllah, there's no evidences in these books. There's not supposed to, because you are supposed to be sitting with a teacher who's supposed to unpack the text, to break everything down, to give you all of the proofs, to tell you where you're supposed to be going, and then you're to write that in the margins, and that is how you study Hanafi fiqh.